Okay, there's an art and science to being an advisor that can attract $2, $3, $5 million clients. And it's not just their technical ability. It's being able to have a conversation, future pace the relationship so the client knows where it's all going, understand what keeps them up at night and what they ultimately want from you. If an advisor can get into that mode, into that groove, they're going to be very attractive.
This is the Business of Advice podcast, where we help good advisors become great business owners. I am excited for this episode of the Business of Advice podcast, especially for all my advisor friends who listen. We have Duncan MacPherson joining us today, who is the CEO of Plateau Systems, which is an industry-leading business development firm dedicated to elite professionals and companies within the knowledge for profit sector, which is what we describe our financial advisors we work with as. Duncan is not only a speaker and a coach, but also an author on the best practices around client acquisition and really running a great firm. As I said, he's the co-founder of Plateau Systems, and he's the co-author of this book, the Advisor Playbook, which everybody should go pick up if you're a financial advisor. It is a must read. Duncan, thank you for joining us today on the Business of Advice podcast.
Well, thank you very much for that and for the invitation. And I just have to say, I love the branding of your podcast, the Business of Advice. It's such a panoramic descriptor. So you nailed that. It's really good.
Well, thank you. I think, it's a lot of what we're going to talk about today. One of the things we say all the time is our goal is to help good advisors become great business owners and really make that transition from advisor or, at times even salesperson into how do you really run a sustainable business. And I think going back, and maybe my opening question for you, I think you founded Plateau Systems over 20 years ago. It's really focused on this very similar thing, which is why, we're having you speak at some of our events to really work with our advisors. But just to start off, maybe walk people through your journey and how you became so passionate about this idea of practice management and building a great advisory business.
Yeah, for sure. And cut me off if I start rambling here, because
Okay.
I think I'm more interested in my story than anybody else because it's very accidental. But back in the early 90s, I was running a marketing company, and a big chunk of our clients were financial advisors. And I had friends that were in the financial services business, and I started to really pay attention to the industry. And a friend of mine said, hey, if you want to make any real money, get into the business of money, because that's where it all is. And I thought, wow, that's pretty profound. And then I found out how much money he made, and I was shocked. I'd never met anybody who had that type of income. So I started studying the business and working with some financial professionals, and I transitioned around the mid-90s into that becoming the major focal point of my business. And as I was developing some deeper awareness, I read a couple of books. The first was The E-Myth by Michael Gerber, The Entrepreneurial Myth, where he talked about working on the business, not in the business.
Yeah.
And every business is built to be sold. So fixate on its enterprise value and scalable growth. Just a phenomenal book. And it just opened my eyes. Then I read a book called Selling the Invisible by Harry Beckwith. And it was about, amping up your persuasive impact if you're in the service industry. And that was profound. And that was back when the industry was fueled primarily by brokers, right, who were making a sale of a product. But I started to see the evolution where it was more about total client engagement and stewardship and attracting, not chasing. And it was about 97, I had a breakthrough in the US because I'm up in Canada. It was a trial by fire event by fluke. I got invited to speak in St. Pete's at what's that pink hotel there again?
Yeah, the Don Cesar.
That's it. Yeah.
Yeah.
And, it landed. My presentation landed. So then it caught on. And today, a big chunk of our business is with the elite American financial professional. And to your point, fee for service, knowledge for profit. They're not selling a thing. They're promoting the promise of the future. So that's the story. But I love this environment because the advisors we work with, it's not a job, it's a calling. They have immense purpose. They're incredibly productive, but I get as much out of the relationships as they do. So it's really win-win. So anyway, there you go.
It's one of the things, and if people listen to this podcast, they've heard me say it on almost every episode, I think. But this profession done right is one of the most admirable, one of the most noble professions. The amount of things that you can do to help people through some of their best times, and also some of their most challenging or worst times that they're going to face is really what it's about. Which is why we also want to try and help them build a great business and get away from just selling a product. Let me ask a transition question. You work with a lot of offices all over the country. From even some of our conversations, I think a lot of times you're brought in, or they hire you, or they want to learn from you when they've kind of plateaued, when they've hit maybe a growth cap or a growth ceiling. Are there characteristics that you see in the firms that have kind of plateaued in that growth? Are there some things that they're missing that don't allow them to keep growing?
Yeah, it's a great question. And I just want to go back to one quick thing, because we were talking offline and you mentioned Jim Bowen, who heads up First Trust. And if you ever see him present, he talks about the noble profession and, helping people look to the future with anticipation, helping them tune out the noise. That's a very powerful shadow to cast on a group of people. And the legacy and the personal fulfillment is very substantial. So, I just wanted to acknowledge that. But back to your question about plateau avoidance. Yeah, that's often when we do get hired, is when somebody senses that they're on a collision course with capacity issues, a plateau, and they want to keep going. And the first thing we want them to understand is we say, okay, look, you've got a great bench of people with talent and technical ability, but there's a massive absence of process. So we want them to get out of, and that's why I like the title of your podcast. It's not the practice of advice, it's the business of advice. We want them to think like a business owner, run the business like a business, so it's not running them. And this just engineers capacity, it engineers consistency in the client experience. And these are minor adjustments and tweaks. They're not dramatic. We're not disruptive, but it's profound in terms of what that can unlock.
It's one of the things we've been talking about here. Advisors, when they join, I don't know if we would call it a brand promise specifically, but maybe it is. But we say a lot of times you can expect more money, more time, and more fun. And what I see, it kind of even back to what you said, a lot of times, same thing when advisors join us, they've kind of plateaued, or they're working themselves to death, or they're working their team to death, right? So it's not just about necessarily more money. It can be that more time, or it can be that more fun, because built the right way, our top advisors would tell you they work less today than they've ever worked as they build the right process and the right team around it. So if you start working with a firm, are there some key areas? I know you talked about the process. Any other key areas that you're going to look at to really try and diagnose, maybe not even the problem, but opportunities for improvement?
Okay, so the operative word there is diagnose, because yes, there are some untapped opportunities, but there are also some overlooked vulnerabilities, some unmet needs, and some very subtle problems that need to be solved. So the first step in our process is a very thorough gap analysis, okay, that is very tailored to the individual's situation. And our goal is to identify 6 to 8 gaps that one in and of itself will not be that dramatic, but as a cumulative, like a composite, will be profound. And we strive to not only identify them, but just as importantly, address them in a reasonable period of time, which is generally 3 to 6 months. And there's a progression there, okay? I mean, there's an org chart, service matrix, ideal client profile, playbook. There's sort of table stakes, but then there's some very, very subtle sort of nuance elements. And one of them, which I love talking about, is taking a team of great messengers and making sure that they're all tethered with a consistent message in terms of how they articulate value and represent their business and their value. But those 6 to 8 gaps, once those are identified, address those. Ironically, you address 6 to 8 gaps, 6 to 8 new ones emerge. But that's the sort of unintended consequence of growth. But you just keep up with them. And so that's how we start.
Let me ask, and it's not a question we talked about before, but just as you said that, where that took me is, and we just had, as we're recording this a few days ago, we called our AE Leadership Summit. You know, one of the things that I see from time to time, so I'm just going to ask you maybe any advice you have for, let's say, advisors, but any small business owner really that deals with this, is the advisors will realize what it is that they need to fix, or maybe they've identified what these are. So many of them have this challenge, though, of especially if they're still the primary revenue generator of the business, meaning they tend to be spending most of their day sitting with clients, you know, or prospective clients. How do they balance that with, okay, now we've got to work on the business, not just in the business? Is there a process that you're able to take people through to help them improve those gaps while they're also, you know, working in the business also?
Okay, so you said something very interesting that is actually profound, in that the more a financial professional runs the business like a business and keeps working on the business, they become more attractive to business owners themselves.
Yeah.
Because the mindset is completely aligned, because both parties are trying to accomplish the same things. So that is a very subtle distinction that is, the art of attracting attractive clients, like that millionaire next door. What's really key, and I listen to myself occasionally, is we want the lead advisor especially, but everybody else, to understand the importance of depersonalizing the business. Okay, so what I mean by that is, it can't be the Duncan show.
Mm-hmm.
The marketplace can't just gravitate towards people. The people are essential. Skills, qualities, intentions, very important. We want clients to have as much appreciation for the practice and the client experience that creates, and the process and how that puts all of the pieces of the puzzle together and creates liberation and order for the client. If they can be just as bought in to the process and the practice as they are to the people, I mean, how high is high? And we see this all the time.
When you talk about practice management, there's a lot of books and there's a lot of people out there that you know, kind of say they do practice management. Are there any pet peeves or things that you see around practice management?
Pet peeves. You know, this would probably apply to a lot of elements regarding change. It's that a lot of people talk about talking about things. There's a lot of talking.
Yeah.
And less doing. So I guess what I really want to focus on is translating ideas into results and being hyper mindful of the law of diminishing intent. We consume so much information, so much of it's got the lasting value of a Red Bull, right? Just goes to our heads to die. When we can get into that mindset of identifying what's relevant and then applying it with a mindset that says done is better than perfect. Let's just get it done and we'll refine it in real time because our intentions are honorable. I don't know if it's a pet peeve per se, but yeah. I just want a bigger fixation on implementation than intent.
One thing I see, and sometimes we're guilty of constantly bringing in speakers and different people for our advisors to learn from, but sometimes there's this idea also of being able to focus on, you know, it's not necessarily is there something that's going to make it better. I give you an example. We had a speaker at this event a few days ago, and he was talking about, how you structure your sales system, and then within your CRM system, how do you make sure that the process is followed? And someone asked him, what do you think is the best CRM system? And he said something profound. He said, the one that you will use consistently. And I think sometimes in this practice management, people will go down this path of, okay, we're building out kind of this process, and then we hear someone else speak, so now we're going to go in and change the process, versus just getting really good at building a process that you can follow is one of the challenges that we see quite often.
Oh, that speaker is absolutely bang on. Just whatever you'll commit to using and deploying consistently is absolutely right. And listen, I love speaking events and conferences because they validate the fact that you're on the right track. They create some nagging doubts that maybe there's some unmet needs that need to be addressed. But the value of every presentation begins when it's over. Okay. What is that audience going to do with that information? Or is it just about, a pep talk and clapping and, all of that? So it's important to get the motivation happening at these events, but the back end, in terms of implementation support, that's where the real value is.
I had to write that down. I'm going to start using that at all our events. That's good. So, right but it is, right? I see so many people get excited, then do nothing with it versus like go execute on the back end. I want to change gears just a little bit because this is something that you talk about and not just in the book, but I know something that you do a lot of training around. And that's what we're seeing is more high net worth clients. In May, I think Fidelity said that the number of 401k and IRA millionaires hit a new record there with over 675,000 accounts that had over $1 million, which was double from 2020. At our event that we had, I would say, I've always said this, I think our advisor's sweet spot has always been that $500,000 to $1.5 million client. They need some planning for how to make that the money last. But I asked the question, I said, how many of you have seen more high net worth clients in the last year than ever before? And I put that number at over $2 million, and every single hand in the room went up. Just everyone has seen more money. And I think some of there's been a lot of wealth created over the last few years. But as advisors, that was a long way to set up this question. As advisors start to see more high net worth clients, how does their maybe specifically sales process have to change or evolve?
Great question. Again, the mindset begins with, okay, am I a $5 million advisor who's growing up market from $500,000 clients? Like, is that who I'm becoming? And am I a serious student at studying what it is that the high net worth client wants? That's a very profound distinction. It's not what I do. It's what the client wants. What are their unmet needs as their life becomes more complex? How can I create professional contrast, right, to attract that person? So the first thing I tell our clients is be a serious student. Study everything there is to study around the clients that you strive to attract. The Millionaire Next Door by Tom Stanley.
Yeah.
It's a timeless book. In fact, it's more timely today in light of what you said than it was when it came out 20 odd years ago because of demography and more people hitting that inflection point, understanding what it is they want. And a big part of that is the psychological aspect. Okay, there's an art and science to being an advisor that can attract $2, $3, $5 million clients. And it's not just their technical ability. It's being able to have a conversation, future pace the relationship so the client knows where it's all going, understand what keeps them up at night and what they ultimately want from you. If an advisor can get into that mode, into that groove, they're going to be very attractive. So I know that's a sort of oversimplistic response, but it's a study.
Well, on the same topic of study, I think not just the process you take them through, but I would say the needs of a high net worth client. And this is probably the biggest conversation we have to have with advisors. I've had a few that say, we like this. We want to go target $10 million plus. And I try and tell them, like, the expectations at that level are dramatically different, right? And the competition that you're going to have at that level, the things that they provide. So I think when you look at that higher net worth client, estate planning, charitable giving, tax planning tend to be a lot bigger deals, which the only reason I'm asking this, because this is something you all teach and kind of train around, advisors at that point have to start finding some partners, right? If whether it's a good estate planning attorney, a good CPA, are there any thoughts or advice you have on how they can go build those relationships and incorporate that in to what they're doing?
Okay, so there's a lot there. Stephen Covey, one of his habits, he talked about beginning with the end in mind. So where's it all going? So the first thing the advisor needs to do is have a panoramic and all-encompassing process that the client grows into. The thing I love about the $2 to $5 million client is that's the movable middle. They're going to keep tracking, okay? But they're generally very hardworking, self-made, first-generation affluent. They're respectful. They want to delegate because they're not done. They still have more to do. So they want to be liberated to go live their life, okay? But there has to be a process in place where the client understands the complete picture, where it's going, and they got to buy into that process and delegate to the advisor and say, hey, just let me go and do my thing. The point about strategic partners, okay, so here's actually a pet peeve. Okay, so a lot of advisors talk about these circles of influence, okay, which is fair enough. I mean, this is semantics, but circles of influence, that means that these people can influence others to help you grow your business, in essence. I much rather consider them to be strategic partners that you engage into your process so the client has the complete picture. It's more client-centered. So we have a simple little approach. It's called VAST. Okay, so it's an acronym, VAST. It's a value-added support team. So the advisor does not go out and reach out to a CPA or an attorney to say, hey, let's get into this reciprocal, referral relationship where I'll refer business to you, you refer business to me. That just doesn't work.
Yep.
If the advisor approaches these other service providers and say, hey, look, we want to raise the bar and elevate the client experience. We want to engage you into our process so our client has the complete picture. That's very, very well received. And it's common that they'll want to buy into that. And the best thing is it positions the advisor as effectively the personal CFO, right? In my world, that means complete family office, right? Where the advisor knows, okay, you're the keystone of all of this. You have oversight, you provide accountability, and that clarity I'm looking for as a client. I will say, there's a gentleman at First Trust who works with Chris Jepson. His name is Brian Gallery, and he's really cracked the code on engaging strategic partners. Very process-driven, incredibly effective. So if there are any First Trust fans listening in, it might be worth looking at that resource and that deliverable, because that is next level. That I call that special forces level. What I'm talking about is, it's good stuff and it works. It's very effective, but somebody wants to go to that next level, that would be something to look into. But bottom line is the $2 to $5 million client, the suddenly affluent, they've had a liquidity event, something's happened, they've got all kinds of unmet needs that they want to have addressed. The advisor with a process can make those self-evident in terms of what those gaps are, and then help connect them. Not cobbling it together with little sales here and there, but with an all-encompassing process the client grows into. That's my view.
One thing I love that you said there, because I've seen, you've been in this business as long as you and I both have now. You've seen all these programs over the years about like, oh, we'll teach you the code to getting, tons of referrals from CPAs or estate planning attorneys. And you said something subtle there, but I want to make sure advisors pick up on this, is if you approach it more about how to build a team to support the client versus like that's partner in some way to refer people back and forth. Because I don't know in the 20 years I've been in this business, I've seen any of those programs actually work. I think the only person they work for is the person who's built it and is charging the advisor a fee to learn the system, right? It's and I think so much of it is focused on how do we refer people back and forth versus how do we build a team that really supports the client.
You know what's interesting about that? Whenever I do a consultation with an advisor or a team, I say to them, I said, let's pretend that one of your best clients is listening to us right now. Okay, so let's be an open kitchen. Let's just be completely transparent. All roads lead to how we elevate the client experience. So let's not talk about any trickery or tactics and things that we would not be proud to share with a client, especially in that $2 to $5 million sweet spot. They don't want to be sold. They want to buy into something.
Yep.
That's a very, very big difference. And that forthright, service-oriented mindset is very attractive. So good pickup there.
Yeah, that's great. Just a little pivot here. I want to talk a little, because you've obviously done a lot of work with advisors over these past few years when many of their businesses were a little disrupted, at least early on, so they had to adjust the way that they were generating new prospects, how they were communicating with clients. A lot of that is virtual and online stuff. As we've had some time to get through these last few years and people have adjusted, what have you seen that you think firms got right during this period of time, maybe even specifically with how they're using technology and doing virtual stuff? And then what are some things that you think firms have maybe got wrong that aren't going to last?
Okay, so again, great question. So in the military, they have an expression, embrace the suck. Right? You got to embrace it. So when a mission, when a plan, it doesn't work, an external dependency or force conspires against it, and now it's off the rails, it's either going to serve you or hurt you. And the best advisors in this business, they embrace it. It's kind of Darwinian, but it's not survival of the fittest. It's who can adapt.
Yep.
So they adapt, and there's a mindset, right? There's always a bull market somewhere. And you think about mindset, okay? Everybody's either a fountain or a drain. Okay, a fountain of optimism and positivity, or a drain of negativity and woe is me. That's one thing that this has revealed, is the top advisors embrace whatever's going on in the world, and they think to themselves, it's not the wind, it's the set of the sail. How do I harness this? Okay. I guess on the other side of that is the people who are locked in the status quo and make minimal adaptations, complain a lot, and incrementally kind of starts to wear them down, and they kind of, project that to the world, and they become less attractive. And that group, as I've often said recently, are on a collision course with obsolescence, because market forces and commoditization just are not kind if we don't adapt. So that's my view, and that's what I see virtually every day in my interactions.
Are you seeing some tactical, and let me maybe set this up a little better. We had an advisor this week at our event say, he loves Zoom so much that he's not sure he's going to go back to in-person appointments. And we were talking, and I told him, I said, I think you might be making a bit of a mistake there, right? Like, I think there's some areas where you can use that well, but I said, I think there's also an element to trust building that somewhere in your process, you want to meet those people face to face. Are there any of these adjustments that people have made that you think will be around forever, but are there some that you think maybe we revert back to the way things used to work?
Okay, so I'm going to connect the last question to this question, bring them together. So if you think of yin yang, right? You need the dark to appreciate the light. You need the cold to appreciate the warm. Okay, so this experiential reality of us going through this episode, it actually helps us in a lot of ways. It's a pain, it's disruptive, it's not fun. It sure is nice when it's behind us, but it shapes us, okay? The thing I love about yin yang is the balance, okay? So what I say to advisors today is balance high tech with high touch. Okay, so the more technology creeps into our lives, the more the human touch really matters and really stands out. So yeah, I know advisors that would do 2 or 3 client meetings a year in person.
Yep.
And, so everybody, they had to jump in their car. They had to, plan and schedule, get ready. And then things would happen, right? Car trouble, clash in appointments, whatever the case may be. Those advisors today are doing one face-to-face meeting a year and two supplementals over a digital platform like this. And because it's process driven, it's not just like a fireside chat and a group hug. Like there's specific things getting done, and it's ramped up really well. It's executed flawlessly, and there's an impeccable follow-up after the fact. Clients love it. You give them the gift of time. They show up for the meetings. They get so much from the meetings, but technology does not replace the human touch. So I still want that face-to-face, in-person, deep dive session, but net balance high tech with high touch. The things that are commoditizing a lot of advisors that aren't adapting, a lot of it is technology driven. So now you're living and dying by that sword.
Yep.
What the high tech solutions on their own do not have is the high touch component. So there's so much of that in our approach that just balances out beautifully.
That's good. Yeah, you said something there. I'm going to use that as kind of a pivot to your book, the Advisor Playbook. There's a few things in there that you talk about, and I've heard your partner Chris talked about these at our event that we had also that really resonated with advisors. And I'll put it around the idea of like just challenging and being thoughtful about the language that you use in your practice. So two things that jumped out was the concept of, well, let me put it this way. What you would say is that you should never have a junior advisor or an associate advisor title in your office. Another one that you talk about is you should never call your client meetings, annual reviews. Will you just talk about why that language matters? Maybe around those two specific ones, because I know they are ones that really resonated with our advisors when they heard that the first time.
I'll tell you where that really became obvious to me was back in the day. Many financial advisors had sales assistants. And I said, oh, okay, so that person's there to help you make a sale. How does the client benefit from that?
Yeah.
Right? Now they're called client service associates, right? Or client experience specialists or whatever. Their roles and responsibilities have not changed dramatically, but you probably saw this in that book because we say it a lot. The words matter, and it's not what you say, it's what they hear. Mm-hmm. And people subconsciously internalize the words and say to themselves, how does this benefit me? Does this align with what I want? So the junior, we want that to be an associate advisor. Okay, it's part of the team. So it's a different person, but using the same practice and same process. So it's not a handoff. It's arguably an upgrade, right? You think about 80-20. We tell a lot of advisors, look, the 80% of your clients who generate 20% of the business, you're doing them a disservice by keeping them. Not only is their happiness coming at the expense of the 20% who generate 80% of the business, but they would be better off if you delegated them to an associate advisor who had your same philosophy, your same commitment to practice management, comparable technical ability, and were process driven. They weren't winging it. It's win-win across the board. Now, your point about the review meeting. Okay, so I'm a client. This is what you don't want to hear from a client. When you call me and say, hey, it's time for a review meeting, you do not want me to say, it's all good. Whatever you think. I'm good. I'm busy. I got a lot going on. Whatever you think. Some advisors hear that and they go, oh, that's cool. They really trust me. It's not cool. Because here's what they're really saying. I don't see the merit in getting in my car and driving down there to rehash something that's already happened.
Yep.
I'm busy. And at that moment, loyalty fatigue is born. And that's a bad wedge that can come in between you and your relationship. So we want that review meeting to be positioned as as you said, strategy and tactical meeting where we will invest the past into the future, make mid-course corrections, make sure we're completely aligned and in sync, and it is an essential part of our process. And if a client says, hey, it's all good, I'm busy. Hey, the meeting's happening on your behalf. We'll send you an output of what we discussed, but I need to let you know that going forward, you got to make this a priority because it's such a huge part of the process. Okay, so I'm oversimplifying that too, but that conviction, that positioning, you want a client to buy into that. And that's incidentally why we keep saying to the advisors, keep hammering and imprinting the concept of process, okay? We don't offer advice. Advice is part of our process. We don't offer planning. Planning is a big part of the process, right? Service, part of the process. We don't sell insurance. Risk management is part of the process. You know, Confucius said, water dripping on a stone will eventually make a mark. So keep dripping the concept of process. Get the client to get their head around this thing that you've created, right? And that's proprietary. So anyway.
No, that's good. Are there any other, let's call them, we've always kind of done it this way, concepts that you think advisors need to rethink?
Yeah. Oh my gosh. The lead advisor has to, in the spirit of depersonalizing, outsourcing as much as they can, automating, allocating, delegating, outsourcing. You know, you go to a dentist, you're there for an hour, you might see the dentist for 5 or 10 minutes.
Yep.
They stay in their lane. They know what they get paid to do. And you're okay with it because you're bought into the whole experience. Right now, we're talking to 25-year veterans, tigers whose stripes were changing. And we're saying, okay, so you've cobbled together 300 households, 800 holdings. You're all over the map, and this is undermining you. It's undermining the client experience. It's putting everything at risk. So we say to them, get out of the asset management business. Get out. Outsource it. It's all commoditized. I'm telling you, you don't do it better than others necessarily. There are others who have scale. That's their lane. If you work 45 hours a week, you might spend 15 hours managing money, 15 hours managing your business, 15 hours managing your clients. What if you gave yourself the gift of time? You outsource that to, platforms and models, people who have scale and impeccable track records, and liberated yourself to go deeper into what's proprietary, your business and your clients. That's a very, again, it's something people have to get their heads around, right? Because it's disruptive, but everyone wins. So again, oversimplified, but I would have to say that's happening right now, and it's massive.
I'm going to use that to ask maybe a question before we jump into a lightning round, but it's one of the things I see. So we have this asset management business, operates kind of like a TAMP, but we have our RIA set up, and we'll have advisors who come on and want to do self-managed. And we've actually tracked, I shared this at the event, how much they've underperformed if they would have just used kind of the portfolios that our team builds. Now, keep in mind, we have a full-time chief investment officer. We have an outsourced chief investment officer that we leverage also, and about half a dozen CFAs. So, that are all day just figuring out how to optimize these portfolios. And so that's one of those areas where I think more advisors are realizing, like, I don't want to say it's a commodity, but it has become commoditized. I think that's one of those things that technology has done. Are there other, maybe looking into the future, are there some other areas where you see technology commoditizing, maybe the wrong way to say it, but being able to help advisors automate some things that they're doing so they can focus on the things that can make them unique and different?
Well, first of all, just going back for a second, I've polled a lot of very affluent people over the years. Very few of them, the ones that are enlightened, are not that fixated on short-term performance.
Yep.
They're focusing on the trajectory, where it's all going. They're pretty enlightened. So that reinforces what you were saying regarding, just the commoditization and just, sort of rising above, working in the business, grinding it out. being more process driven instead. So there's that. So back to your question. So you look at that stat you gave around, in literally a short window of time, the high net worth community essentially doubling. You think about demographic forces. I want advisors to focus on the client's entire life and the back half of the journey and the psychological impact after they've hit their inflection point. So if you have a client, just give you an example, who set a goal 15 years ago to become financially independent, $5 million, financially independent, that's my goal. And they just chipped away, right? Just build upon it. So it was a 15 or 20 year overnight success story. Pow, they're there. It's great, but there's an element of anticlimax. It's like, now what? Where do I go from here? So I use this analogy. I say, because I know two people have climbed Mount Everest. It sounds awful, like what they went through. But hey, virtually all of them hire a Sherpa. But the misnomer or what's fascinating is you don't hire a Sherpa to get you to the summit. You hire the Sherpa to get you back down. Okay. Most of these people, the investment of effort to get to the summit and plant their flag, they stand up there for 10 minutes and then they got to get back down. And that's where most people get in trouble, is on the way down. Many affluent families, when first generation earned money becomes second generation found money, and all these complexities and all these psychological elements, that's where it's a minefield. And the advisor can make himself or herself indispensable to the family by having a process that includes elements to help them deal with those complexities, many of which are psychological, emotional, and again, very complex. So that's, in my view, the advisor of the future, who's future pacing out to the back half of the journey and the issues they can address, the problems they can solve back there, not just getting to that one goal.
You said something there that just made me think of a few weeks ago. I was at a John Maxwell leadership event that he put on. And he said something, he's like, you have to be careful as a business owner not to confuse your success with that you're a great business owner, but maybe you're benefiting from tailwinds in your business. He said, but when the magic happens is when you've built a great business and you have big tailwinds behind that business, like that's when you see these take off. Just even as we were talking about those numbers, the opportunity, and why I think what you're doing, what we're trying to do to help advisors build these great businesses is if you look at the tailwinds for this industry right now, they are spectacular. So if you have a great business built, the tailwinds that are coming with the amount of money, I think the number I just saw recently was, I don't know, 65 trillion in the baby boomer generation that will be transitioning over the next 8 to 10 years into this kind of retirement phase. Like building that great business right now helps you just benefit from those tailwinds in a big way.
I had a friend who used to say, even turkeys can fly in a strong wind.
Yep.
Right. And, it's one thing to achieve lift and success when all the boats are rising. But those who can keep the continuity, keep it rolling when there's friction and disruption, it's so incredibly powerful. That first occurred to me in 2008 when I saw advisors come out of that way better.
Yep.
Way more momentum, way more relevance and impact coming out of it than going into it. And it's really powerful. So again, you want all of this to serve us, not hurt us, and just sort of rise above it and have some faith and optimism for the Renaissance. But demography is such a powerful force And we're right there. I mean, I don't
Yeah.
think there's a better time to be a financial professional than right now.
That's what I've said. I think the next decade is going to be incredible. And you talked about '08. We've seen it over the last 2 years, right? It's crazy. Even here, the advisors who had all-time record years and are like doing things that others didn't even think were imaginable, and then other advisors that had bad years, right? And the difference tended to be those that were optimistic, but also those who have built a great business, right? And were able to take advantage is a bad way to say that. We're able to capitalize on the opportunity of people being scared and wanting to come talk to someone and get help.
And a big part of that mindset is not always believing your own hype. Like I read a book a long time ago called Only the Paranoid Survive. Okay. And that was written by Andy Grove, one of the founders of Intel, where he basically said, be positive, be optimistic, but there is a positive power that comes from negative thinking and factoring in, vulnerabilities and external dependencies that might not cooperate. So just, again, finding that balance. It's a mindset, but it will never supersede the gratitude and appreciation we have for life and succeeding through the service of others and being positive and being that beacon that people look towards, that fountain, so to speak. But you just need to have a little bit of that strategic element that says, it's not all happy high notes here. I can't believe my own hype. I need humility. I need perspective and proportion. And I got to know that I got to play defense every now and again too.
A good friend of mine who's been on the podcast, Greg Brenneman, he said it really well. He said a leader's job, and I think this is what we saw with the people who did well during this, is to exude hope and absorb fear. And he's like, it's not that there aren't, lots of things to be worried about, but he's like, the best, they absorb that, and they're able to turn that around into hope for the people that they're leading or working with. So
that's really good. Really good.
Okay, Duncan, let me ask you 5 quick, what I would call lightning round questions that I've asked everyone just to wrap this up kind of at the end. First one, what lesson have you learned over, I'm just going to start saying now because we've been doing it for a while, since COVID started. What lesson have you learned over that period of time that you think you'll carry forward for the rest of your life?
I've had this mindset for a while, but it's really become amplified in the last couple of years. And that is that you cannot pour from an empty cup. The best way to take impeccable care of your team and your clients is to take impeccable care of yourself. Okay. So self-care, diet, exercise, and all those different elements. It's basically part of the mindset that says, I'll take care of me for you. And I say that because I've seen a lot of advisors who self-sacrifice. Everyone's happiness comes at their own expense. They're wearing themselves out.
Yeah.
It's not sustainable. And it doesn't create the level of respect or appreciation you would think. Self-sacrifice actually breeds contempt. Self-interest through the service of others breeds a lot of respect and durability. So that's really become a focal point for me after this last couple of years.
Yeah, that's a great lesson and takeaway from that. Okay, second question. What is the one thing that you've done to graduate from good to great in your profession?
I don't know if it's one thing, but I guess one thing would be the entrepreneurial paradox, and that is to make myself obsolete. Make this business be able to run like a Swiss watch without me having to be here or be present for it to be productive. It's not the Duncan show. Build process, build brand, get people bought in, be interested in the people and what they aspire to. So now I'm sort of drifting here, but I'd have to say that has been front and center. And I also see, like yesterday, I talked to an advisor. I mean, we're talking at the pinnacle, the summit of this business. The humility and the way he showcases everybody else and his conviction around process and client experience. This guy is in rarefied air, and yet he's so down low key, much downplays his contributions. It's very powerful to see.
That's cool. Great answer. Third question, is there anything that you're doing this year that you're excited about to drive your own personal growth?
Well, trying not to take anything for granted. So trying to balance my appreciation with my aspirations. But that's all fine and good. I really do believe in it, but it's qualitative. I think the most quantitative thing I've been doing is writing a book, writing another book. It's so easy to start a book. It's really tough to finish it. And then the world changes. There's a force majeure, right? A lightning strike. I went back to the book and said, this thing's obsolete. I got to redo it.
Got to clean up everything.
Yeah, the context, everything's got to be more relevant based on the future. But here's my point. If I'm the only person that reads that book, it'll be worthwhile. The exercise, what it's brought out in me, what it's done to force me to think things through, it's been powerful. So reading books, I'm an avid reader. I consume a lot of information, but writing a book.
Writing it.
Yeah.
That's
so
good.
There you go.
Okay. On that topic of books, what is the book? It can't be your own book. I should qualify that. What is the one book that you've recommended the most to other entrepreneurs or business leaders?
It would be The E-Myth and The Millionaire Next Door. You want to hear something interesting about The Millionaire Next Door?
Yeah.
20 years ago, Tom Stanley said, he wasn't talking to financial advisors. He was talking to clients of financial advisors. He said, when you are vetting a financial advisor, before you show them anything, ask them to see their books, ask them to see their investment statements, see if they eat their own cookie. Now that was so provocative, but the advisors who embrace that, so every business is built to be sold. You begin with the end in mind.
Yeah.
Enterprise value is impacted by how clean are your books? Are you really running a business like a business? When somebody comes in to buy it, are you just, hey, here it is. We're so proud of what we built. Everything bumper to bumper. It served them so incredibly well. And of course, there's other elements that contribute to enterprise value. But yeah, those are probably the two most important.
So two iconic ones for sure. Okay, final question. What's the best piece of advice you've ever received?
Probably, undoubtedly, focus more on who you're becoming than how much you're earning. I would have to say that kind of haunts me. And I mean that in a positive way.
Yep.
We're all capitalists. We're all trying to self-actualize, become the best version of ourselves. And part of that can be quantitative, monetary success. But money doesn't make us valuable. We don't set goals for what they make us and get us. It's for what it makes of us. So Jim Rohn, early 90s, he said to me, don't ask yourself, how much am I earning? Ask yourself, who am I becoming? And based on cause and effect, the earn will pretty much take care of itself.
Great piece of advice for everybody to live with. Duncan, it is always a pleasure to spend some time with you and appreciate you sharing so much value. I know we've talked about the book, The Advisor Playbook, which every financial advisor should go pick up. But are there some other ways for our listeners to connect or continue to engage with you?
Okay, so first of all, I just want to say how much I appreciate how well prepared and how organized your entire team is.
Thank you. Yeah, we've got a good team. They make me look good.
Yeah, I can relate to that. No, but you really put a lot of thought into this, and you didn't just call it in and show up and be random. That's very, very much appreciated. Number one, probably the best place people can stay connected with us is LinkedIn. So just look for me, Duncan MacPherson. We're very active on LinkedIn. I also have an app. You can put Pareto in your pocket. It's called the Pareto Systems app for iPhone or Android. And I call that always on, because we always want you to work on yourself, personally, professionally, always work on your business. So I'd say those are the two best things to do. And if you want to get to know us a little bit better, check us out at Pareto Systems. And I think if you have a relationship with a wholesaler at First Trust, go look at two tools that Chris and I created. One is called Total Client Engagement, and the other one is called Vein of Gold. And your First Trust wholesaler will gladly make those on-demand resources available. They encapsulate the essence of our philosophy and process. So, long-winded answer, but I'd say that's where I'd go.
Yeah, no, some great ones, and they've been great for us, and even having you guys come speak at some of our events. So we appreciate Mr. Bowen and everyone at First Trust for that. One thing I would also just recommend and second for everyone, I follow you on LinkedIn. You post some just great videos and great content out there, so must follow there. So for everyone who listened, if you enjoyed this episode, make sure you hit subscribe so you can be notified of all our future episodes. And if you would, go leave a review so other people know that it's a valuable use of their time. Duncan, again, thank you very much for taking the time today.
My absolute pleasure. Thank you.